Well, hi everybody, and welcome to another edition of Adam's Music Box, where today we're going to celebrate the birthday of one of my very favorite musicians of all time, and that, of course, is Jack Bruce. Now, Jack Bruce was a genre in and of himself because he did things unlike anyone before or unlike anyone since. And the most interesting part of that is he didn't do this for pretentious reasons because he didn't do it for conscious reasons. He just was. He had this innate talent that took his playing and his singing and his composition into directions that nobody really could have planned. He may well have been a professional classical cellist, but the life and circumstances around him brought him into the world of electronic music. And I don't mean that in the sense of dance, but in the sense that the cello was replaced by the upright bass, which was eventually and most famously replaced by the electric bass guitar, an instrument that he pioneered like nobody else. Now, people like Monk Montgomery were doing interesting things with the bass guitar in the 60s, in the jazz and sort of proto-funk realm, the soul realm. In terms of rock and roll, John Entwistle was a very important electric bassist, but the person who really blew the doors open on that instrument and paved the way for the things that we got from people like Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius and Marcus Miller and so many others, that was really Jack Bruce. He didn't play the bass to simply keep time. He didn't play the bass to rock things steady. The bass was a lead instrument for Jack Bruce. Think of him as the John McLaughlin of the bass, which says a lot because he and McLaughlin were in some of the same bands together. Think of him like the Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea of the bass. Think of him like the Billy Cobham or Tony Williams of the bass. Again, musicians that Jack Bruce played with. And that idea of the bass as a lead instrument in multiple genres, instrumental and vocal, jazz, whether free jazz, experimental fusion, funk and groove based fusion, singer songwriter music, heavy rock, jazz rock, blues rock, psychedelic rock, the list goes on. He could play anything, but he always retained that classic sound and the dexterity of his left hand that just flew up and down the fretboard, even when he was playing fretless, was just a sight to be seen and a sound to be heard. Now, although he's probably most remembered by rock audiences for his work with Cream, I think some of his most interesting work came in a band that really invented fusion as we know it. And this was the Tony Williams lifetime. The first album was as a trio. With organ, you had Larry Young; on the drums, Tony Williams himself; on guitar, John McLaughlin. For the second album, Turn It Over, they became a quartet with the addition of Jack Bruce on bass and occasionally on vocal. Now, sadly, no good live recording ever existed of this band, or so we thought. But the great German television show Beat Club, that featured artists from all over the world and all different kinds of genres, just last year they unearthed footage, around 20 minutes or so, of that wonderful second lifetime lineup featuring Jack, Larry, Tony, and John. See, we're on a first name basis, aren't we? And as good as Turn It Over is, and my word, is it good, to see them in full flight live was absolutely astounding. There was really nothing like it. It paved the way for the weather reports, the Mahavishnu orchestras, the Return to Forevers, the 11th houses of this world. It all started there, and Jack was a very important part of it. Jack, of course, continued to be involved with Tony Williams. There were the famous Stockholm sessions from, I think, 1974, which featured Alan Holdsworth on guitar. Imagine the Alan Holdsworth of bass and the Alan Holdsworth of Alan Holdsworth together. Well, a bootleg recording of some of the jamming that they did in studio in Sweden exists. Go to YouTube, you won't be disappointed. But perhaps if we really want to look at the heart and soul of Jack Bruce, we've got to look at his solo albums, which were absolutely brilliant, and each one was different. One of my favorites, because it was really the first Jack Bruce album that as a kid I really got into, was Out of the Storm from 1974. The writing on it is absolutely exceptional. It has everything you'd want from a Jack Bruce album: the mysticism, the poetry, the melancholy, a feeling that is sort of not quite bucolic, not quite industrial, not quite fantastical, but a bit of all of those things, making it classic Jack Bruce. His debut solo album, of course, Songs for a Tailor, featured some classic songs, including some that were later adopted by the great UK-based jazz fusion band Colosseum. In 71, there was Harmony Row, which featured the great John Marshall on drums. Again, superlative songwriting, from the Tearjerkers to the Foot Tappers. A year before that, he did a free jazz album called Things We Like, which showed that not only could he play a very heavy, driving, yet ethereal fusion with Tony Williams, but he could also do a kind of acoustic free jazz that was very much pioneering in that heady late 60s era. One of the very best Jack Bruce songs ever came from 1977's House Tricks, a great album including Simon Phillips on the drums. And the song Without a Word is one of the most beautiful songs ever written. It's full of emotion, but without tacky sentimentality. It's the kind of song that could have been written 20 years before and performed by Frank Sinatra. It's the kind of song that if someone on YouTube with a guitar or a piano did a stripped down version of it today, you could say, ah, what an amazing song. But that's what Jack Bruce was doing. And another thing, since I'm sort of giving a list of the coolest things to check out from Jack Bruce, check out a performance that Jack Bruce did. I believe it was also on German television, from 1980, with a stellar band behind him. David Sancious on keyboards, who played with Peter Gabriel, Bruce Springsteen, and many others. The great Billy Cobham, Mahavishnu Orchestra's first drummer, on the drums from Colosseum, and from Humble Pie, Clem Clemson on guitar. And the band play all of the hits in reimagined arrangements. And there's a particularly spellbinding moment of that performance where they play a tune called Bird Alone that Jack wrote about Charlie Parker, I believe, because he was Bird, and the bass playing, the interplay between the drums and the bass, and the vocals that just don't let up. Wow. He also experimented with the new high-tech sounds of the 80s, because 80s music still in many ways feels futuristic because of the drum machines, the electronic drums, the new synthesizers, the sequencers, the samplers, and this was appropriately called automatic. And what was so interesting about this album was that it showed against the odds that music made with the modern instruments of the 80s could still have that gritty, earthy, ethereal soul that many people from the 60s and 70s were looking for in the 80s. Jack Bruce pulled it off as no one else could. The stuff he did with Cream, of course, legendary. There was a sort of semi-Cream reunion in the 90s with Gary Moore on guitar and Ginger on the drums, and they released an album called BBM, which was really, really good stuff. Jack and Ginger, of course, didn't get along, but of course they reunited with Eric in the early 2000s in London and in New York, which showed that Jack still had it then, and he still had it even a few years ago when I saw him doing big band music with his fretless electric bass. He never lost it. Jack Bruce was always Jack Bruce. I remember well when he died a few years ago. I went to a tribute concert for him that was quite meaningful, but you can't replace Jack. You can't really pay musical tribute to Jack, but what you can do is listen to his music, because he was so unique. He was quintessentially rooted in the Scottish music of his upbringing, but he was transatlantic in his appeal. He was universal in his tastes, in his influences, and he had a humanitarian streak. He wasn't the kind to go on television talking about his politics, but he definitely had that humanitarian streak, and that may well have informed some of the more emotional moments of his writing. Who can say, but it's strongly likely. So listen to Jack Bruce today and always. You will not be disappointed if you haven't heard him before. And if you have, well, today's your lucky day because I'm requesting you to get onto a Jack Bruce playlist right now. Like, subscribe, and we will see you next time. Take care.